All right, let's go ahead and get started. We may have a few more people trickle in here, but I think we've got most everyone. So thank you everyone for joining the first steering committee for the Near Southeast Area Plan. We're really excited to get started. Before we dive into the agenda and everything, I was going to ask, we have both Councilman Paul Cashman and Councilwoman Kendra Black here, ask them to say a few words of welcome. So Councilman Cashman, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight and for your willingness to participate in the Near Southeast Area Plan Steering Committee. I know some of you very well. I know some of you a little bit, and some of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. I am quite sure that by the end of the 18 months or 2 years, or however long it takes for us to find our way through this process, we'll get to know each other real well. My guess is that along the way, we'll agree on some details, we'll disagree on some details, but by the end, I'm confident we'll end up with a plan that will guide the Near Southeast area well into the next couple of decades. I want to thank Scott and his team for the advance work they've done to get us ready for this work. I'm excited to be working with Councilwoman Black and Councilwoman Sawyer and their teams together. Like I said, we've got a lot of work to do, but I think we'll come up with a plan that we'll all be proud of. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Black, did you want to say a few words? Are you, Councilwoman, you're muted.
Gosh, haven't learned yet. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Councilman Cashman. And I said, most of all, I'd like to thank all the community members who are committing themselves to this lengthy process that hopefully will make a difference as our little part of the city evolves. I'm excited to work with everyone. Since I was elected in 2015, I've been asking for a neighborhood planning process for the University Hills neighborhood, which is changing on a daily basis. So I'm super excited that that neighborhood is included. It's just a sliver of my district that is in this planning initiative, but it's a part of our district that's very important and needs some tender loving care and some attention. So again, thank you. I'm excited to work with you all. And Scott, you are a great city planner and a leader, and we're so lucky to have you be part of this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Black, for those words of welcome and kind words. I'll try to live up to them. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We've got a few things we want to get through tonight. I do want to note, just so everyone's aware, this meeting is being recorded and will be available on the website later. So if you want to go back and look at it, you're welcome to at any point in the future, but also just keep that in mind that everything will be recorded tonight. So we'll do sort of welcome and introductions here. And then we're going to talk at you for a little while here, which I apologize for, but is sort of the nature of these kickoff meetings, that we have a lot of information that we want to give you. So we will be presenting some slides and giving you some background information here for the first part of the meeting. And then we do have what we call an understanding the area exercise that we'll be doing in the second half of the meeting, where we'll break out into smaller groups to discuss the area, what you like, what you don't like, and things like that. So you at least have that to look forward to. And we will have opportunities for questions and discussion through this first part of the meeting. But with that, let's move on to the introductions. So I'll have myself and staff introduce ourselves first, and then we'd like all of you to give us a brief introduction, your name, what neighborhood you're from, and what topics interest you the most. So my name is Scott Robinson. I am the project manager for the Near Southeast Area Plan. I am a planner with Denver Community Planning and Development. So you'll be seeing a lot of me over the next 18 to 24 months. There are two other planners that are dedicated team members to this that you'll also be seeing a lot of. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves next. Libby, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I'm Libby Adams. I'm an associate city planner, and I'll be working with Scott and you all on this neighborhood plan. I'm also with community planning and development.
Thanks, Libby. Jason, you want to go?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Jason Morrison, Senior City Planner with Community Planning and Development, and I'll be working on this neighborhood plan with Scott and Libby. And I'm really excited about this particular plan because I actually grew up in the Virginia Village neighborhood. So I'm looking forward to working with all you folks.
Great, thanks, Jason. All right, so now I'm gonna go down the list here of the steering committee members and ask you to, again, tell us your name, what neighborhood you're from, and what topics you're most interested in. So Jim, you're the first one on the list here. You wanna go ahead?
My name is Jim Stone, and I live in the Cook Park neighborhood. I'm interested in what's going to happen around here in the future because I've lived in the area for 44 years. So my concern is genuine and certainly one that would affect me along with anybody else that lives nearby.
All right, thanks, Jim. Up next is Joe McCloskey.
Good evening, folks. Joe McCloskey, former state representative, president of the Holly Manor Condominium Association here in the Welshire neighborhood off of South Holly Street. Here really to support Councilor Black and Councilor Cashman, who I both admire. Preservation of parks is always a big concern and just want to help out where I can. Appreciate being here.
Thank you. Up next, Adrian Kinney.
Hi there, I'm Adrian Kinney. I live in the Virginia Village neighborhood, the subset, the Linwood homes here, the mid-century modern homes. Most interested in preservation and figuring out how to kind of evolve in a proper way instead of some of the other ways Denver has been steamrolled. So hopefully it can evolve in a good way.
Great. Up next, Chris Viscardi.
Good evening, I'm Chris Viscardi. I'm with Kentro Group. We own some large pieces of land in Virginia Village. I think the most interested part that I want to see where this goes is just smart growth, how to plan around transportation, and really a topic as all is affordability and how do we plan for the next 20 years and keeping things affordable and attainable. So that would be my biggest interest.
All right, thank you. Up next, Dustin Brown.
Hi, I'm Dustin Brown. I'm in the Goldsmith area and relatively new to the area and Denver, and just, curious to see how we can evolve, keep what's really great about this neighborhood and also meet the challenges of, the future in a sustainable way.
All right, thank you. Up next, Erica McCallan.
Hi, I'm Erica McCallan. I'm a mom of two. I live in the Goldsmith neighborhood just north of Bible Park because I didn't even really realize that's what it was called until a while ago. And we are most interested in just the future and development of the neighborhood, potential restaurants, walkability, retail, just really making the neighborhood thrive.
All right, thank you. Up next is Evan Derby.
Hey everybody, my name is Evan Derby. I'm in Washington, Virginia Vale, and yeah, I'm really interested in affordability, some things that people have said, affordability, transportation, walkability, being able to have a sustainable environment with lots of green space and a safe place for all of us to connect and have a community. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you. Up next, Guadalupe Cantu.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lupe Cantu for short. And as everyone else has said, I'm very much kind of looking forward to the evolution of this Southeast Planning Committee and what that means with regards to Virginia Village in particular, but Cook Park as well. And more so than anything else, really trying to work through the conundrum of some of our major boulevards that are cutting through this area.
Great, thanks, Lupe. Up next is Harvey Cohen.
Good evening. I'm a resident in the Winston Downs area, Winston area, and we're interested in preservation of the residential makeup of the area that we have now, and also closeness to parks, which we don't have one real close to us. So those are two big areas that the neighbors want me to help address.
All right, thank you. And then Jared Mackey.
Yeah, good evening. Jared Mackey, that lived in the Washington, Virginia Vale neighborhood for about 20 years now, and just really interested about how the built environment continues to impact and shape the community life in these neighborhoods.
Thank you. All right. And then up next, it looks like Jenny Newhoffen. We have Jenny. I can see her, but can you not unmute? Let's see if I can. Is that not working? Okay. Well, maybe we can come back to Jenny if she can get her mic working. So let's move on to Judy Chris.
Good evening. I'm Judy Chris. I am currently president of the Indian Creek Neighborhood Association. We are bordered by Denver on the west and Arapahoe County on the north and on the east and on the south. Our biggest concerns here are traffic in our neighborhood. Quebec is our bordering west on the west, and it has gotten extremely busy in the last couple of years, and speeding is an issue. Our other concern is crime in the neighborhood. We are a neighborhood of 14 individual HOAs. So that is mainly condominiums and townhomes. Some of these were all built back in the late 80s. And at the time, they put their mailboxes on the outside in a community area. And now we're having a lot of problems with mail being stolen and those mailboxes being broken into. So crime in the area and traffic is our big concern. And we're also anxious for when the budget allows to see improvements to the city of Chennai Park.
Okay, thank you. Up next, Kendra Daniels.
Hi, I'm Kendra Daniels. I represent the portfolio. We own a couple of different areas in the Cherry Hills and Colorado Evans area. We just want to keep, as we're developing, we want to keep what the neighborhood would like to see more of, and we just really want to be involved in the future of that area where we own property. So.
All right, thank you. Next, it looks like Lisa Foreman. Lisa, Lisa, looks like you're muted.
Muted me. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep, that's good.
Okay. Once again, my name is Lisa Foreman. I live in Indian Creek. I've lived here since 1996. I have a background, or my career was in real estate development, is in particular multifamily. So I still have an interest in affordable housing in this particular corridor. And I also have a particular interest in the enhancement of Quebec Street as it goes south through from Lowry down to the Goldsmith neighborhood, as well as East Evans Avenue.
All right, thank you. Up next is Maria Torres.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria, and I am the University Hills neighborhood. Interested in, and probably echoing a lot of what other people have said, transit and mobility, affordability, access to green space.
All right, thank you. And next, Miranda Meadow. Let's see, we have Miranda.
Can you not hear me?
Now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. It's weird. It's coming through my phone. But anyway, sorry, Miranda Meadow. I'm a resident of Virginia Village for the last 6 years. I grew up in West Wash Park. I'm a Denver native, went to George Washington High School, so I know the area pretty well. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I guess the things I'm most interested in are walkability and maintaining, diversity to the extent that it exists and growing it within the neighborhood and making it an accessible place for lots of different types of people.
All right, thank you. Up next, Sarah Stewart.
Hello. I'm in the Washington, Virginia Vale area off of Mississippi and Oneida in a townhome community. I am not a Colorado native, so interesting seeing how you all work here in the 12 years that I've been here, and interested in a lot of the infrastructure. Like, we have a lot of plumbing issues over here with old piping, and looking at the fiber optics that are going in for accessibility to the internet, and also education around here. My son is a teen and he does not go to his neighborhood school, and if he actually physically has to go to school, I have to drive him all the way up north past, I can't even think how far it is, but it's past downtown.
Okay, thank you. Up next is Scott Caldwell.
Hi there. Good evening. My name is Scott Caldwell. I'm the market leader for Lincoln Property Company in Denver. Lincoln's a full service ownership developer, property manager of commercial real estate in commercial space and multifamily apartments. We have a project at Colorado Center, I-25 in Colorado. We also have some holdings down the I-25 corridor into the North Tech Center. So I'm just hoping to offer any perspectives I can from the development side of things. I'll also note that I've served on the Transportation Solutions Board for over a decade. And for those who don't know Transportation Solutions, it's the local TMA that services the Colorado Boulevard, Glendale, Cherry Creek areas. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Next, Spencer Stevens.
Hi, everyone. Spencer Stevens. I live in the Virginia Village neighborhood. I am the Zoning and Development Board member for the VVECA, which is the R&O in this area. And some things that interest me, safety, retaining the feel of the neighborhood, developing new entertainment districts in the area, improving roads, especially East Evans, and just looking forward to the entire situation. Thank you.
Thank you. And then looks like maybe Jenny's gotten her audio figured out. Jenny, are you there?
Yep, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Hi, sorry about that. I'm Jenny Newhoffen. I'm in the University Hills North neighborhood. I've been here for over 20 years. I love the location of this neighborhood. What I don't love about it is the access to get to all the great things in this location. And I'd love to see some talk about that for future, being surrounded by light rail stations and great RTD lines. It would be nice if we could safely get to those places in this neighborhood and not be overrun by large developments without thought about the future. I mean, it's one thing to have great property available and build on it, but it's a whole nother thing to have great property available, build on it in a smart way to make use of the surroundings and accessibility for the residents. I also like the small neighborhood feel of our neighborhood and the access that we have to everything around Denver. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think that was all of the steering committee members. If I missed anybody, jump in or raise your hand. But we also have a couple council aides. So Jen and Kathy, do you want to introduce yourselves as well?
I'll go first. Jen Gross. I'm an aide to Councilwoman Sawyer. She sends her regrets. She had a trip completely off the grid planned with her kids for about 2 months now, but I'm taking careful notes and she will be at these meetings in the future. And I don't live in the area. I'm a bit north in Hale, but I have a lot of friends down in this area and I'm really curious to see how this develops and maybe draw some other people into your larger community meetings who may not be on the radar otherwise.
Thanks. Kathy, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Kathy Guile and I'm aide to Councilwoman Black. Actually grew up in Denver, actually traveled Monaco, Virginia Vale, the Evans and Monaco, the whole area, very familiar with it. I'm also here to listen and to learn and hear what people in the area want moving forward.
Thanks, Kathy. And then the last person in the meeting is Stephen Chester, who is with Kimley Horn, who will be our consultant. So I'll let Stephen introduce himself briefly.
Great, thanks, Scott. Yep, as Scott said, my name's Stephen Chester. I'm a city planner, urban planner with Kimley Horn. We're a planning and design firm, nationwide firm, but we have office here in Denver. Thrilled to be working with you all on this project. I formerly was with the city and county of Denver as a city planner. In fact, I was one of the people that Councilwoman Black called when she took office asking why University Hills didn't have a plan, and had to explain to her, oh, we're developing this neighborhood planning initiative. Don't worry, it's on the way. And so it's awesome to see that that day is here. So I'm a resident of Denver. I live in Congress Park, so not too far from this area town. I bike through frequently with my son. And I guess what I'm most interested in is really what you're all most interested in, but not only you all, but also all your neighbors as well. So that's really, our focus as the consultant team is helping the city reach into the entire neighborhood and hear from as many people as possible in as many different ways as possible to really create a true consensus-driven vision for this area of town. So really excited to roll up our sleeves and get to work, and I'm just thrilled to listen today as you discuss what you love most about your neighborhood.
All right, thanks, Stephen, and thank you everyone for that quick introduction. Well, I'm sure we'll get to know each other much better over the next 18 to 24 months. So we have that to look forward to. And with that, let's briefly touch on the roles and responsibilities. So thank you all for reviewing that roles and responsibilities document and signing it and returning it. Really appreciate that. So just wanted to highlight a couple things before we move on. Just reminder of what the role of the steering committee is, which is to spread awareness of the plan and pass out information about the plan to your neighbors and your friends and other folks in the area. We'll provide you with information if you ever need information, if you want questions, come to us. We're happy to give you all of that. Provide advice on the planning process, including things like community engagement, as Stephen was just talking about. How best can we engage with the community? And we'll touch on this more a bit later tonight, but providing that guidance on how the planning process should unfold. Help us generate ideas and refine and improve ideas for the recommendations and content of the plan. We'll get, again, a little more into what that means later tonight, but we really want you all to help guide what actually goes into the plan. and then help us understand what we're getting back from the community. So there's going to be a lot of community input, a lot of community engagement. Help us review that, understand it, and figure out what's important, what the community really wants, and how we can then translate that into the plan. Sorry, skipped one. And then since this is the first meeting, just want to again go over the ground rules for the meeting. So again, this was in the document, but I just want to read these out. First, allow room for all, try to keep remarks and questions brief. We're going to try to keep these meetings to about 2 hours. There are a lot of you, we know you all have important and great things to say, but just try to keep them brief so we can keep the meeting moving and get everyone a chance to participate. Along those lines, first before seconds, ensure other folks have had an opportunity to speak before taking a second turn speaking. If you agree with something someone said, instead of repeating that, you can just say, I agree, or put it in the chat, or other ways of just showing your confirmation so we don't have folks saying the same things. If you disagree, which we expect will happen, and that's good, the committee's intended to be made up of folks with differing viewpoints and differing opinions. So when we disagree, that's fine, but always be respectful. And if you disagree with something someone said, focus on the idea behind what they said, not the person. Again, utilize the hand raise function or chat if you have comments or questions. And then we would like, if possible, for you to turn on your video when speaking so we can see you. And also, the flip side of that, please use your mute button when you are not speaking so we don't get background noise disrupting the presentation or other folks' comments. So a few things coming up. Our next meeting, which will be July sometime, will include an equity training. We have Dante James with the Gemini group, who will be coming in and giving an equity training. We'll again touch on equity a bit more here, but it's going to be really important to this process and this plan to be equitable. So we want to create that foundation early on with all of you. So Dante is really great, and he'll do an equity training with us next month. Because we have to schedule it, match it up with his schedule, we're going to send out a separate doodle poll after this meeting with the dates he's available in July. Hopefully we can find a date that works for all of you as well, because we think this equity training is really important. And then following that second meeting, starting with the third meeting, we'll try to land on a regular meeting night, one night a month. And so we'll probably send out a third doodle poll. Sorry for all the doodle polls, but it's probably the best way to do this. So we'll probably send out a third doodle poll with one night a month. It'll probably be a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday that you all can commit to attending monthly meetings. So look for that. And then we also are going to have some basic information about all of you up on the website. Most of it is from the interest form that you all filled out when you said you were interested in serving on the steering committee. So it'll be things like what neighborhood you're from and what topics you're interested in and any organizations you're affiliated with. So a lot of the stuff you just told us about. But we've taken the information from that interest form, and we just want to make sure it's confirmed. So look for an email after the meeting, probably tomorrow, from us with the information we have, just asking for you to confirm that so that we can put that up on the website so that the community knows who was on the steering committee and understands what the representation is in terms of neighborhoods and interest groups and things like that. So any questions or comments or concerns about the roles and responsibilities or upcoming meetings? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Again, you can use the raise hand button or put something in the chat if you have anything. But if nobody has any questions, we can move on. So up next is what we call Planning 101. So we're just going to give you a pretty quick high-level crash course in planning. We know some of you, this may be familiar information, and we apologize for that if you already know all of this. But we know some of you, this may be your first time really diving into city planning. And so we want to make sure everyone has the necessary knowledge and tools to really engage with it and contribute and understand it. So this is going to be a lot of information. We will go into it deeper in later meetings. So we're just going to throw a lot of information at you tonight because we want to get a lot of terms and ideas in front of you. And then we'll develop those, build on those in upcoming meetings as we start to get more into the plan. But that being said, if you have questions, if something doesn't make sense, please let us know. Probably the easiest thing to do is put it in the chat and then we can address it. Or again, you can use the raise hand. So with that, I will dive into this. And I apologize that you're just going to have to listen to me talk for a while. I will switch off with Libby and Jason a little later, but for now, you're stuck with me. So what is a plan? Why do we do plans? The idea is to identify a shared vision of the community and then figure out how to achieve that vision, addressing the needs of the community and their concerns to make the community what they want to see. So plans are policy documents. So they're not law, they're not regulation, they are policy that provide direction to city staff and city council in making decisions in the future. So the idea is to engage the community in a dialogue about the future, what they want to see, find that vision, and then recommend strategies to achieve it. And we use that again to inform decision-making, both in the city and private entities also use what is in the plans to make decisions. So again, city or plans generally fall into two categories, citywide and neighborhood. I'll get into that in more detail later as well. But that's in this policy bubble, and then also other input like immediate needs, priorities, and other input from the community. All of that guides the actions the city takes. So things like budgeting, regulation, and laws that the city passes, what goes into bond projects, what property owner initiated rezonings are approved, and then what organizations we partner with to achieve other goals. So again, the plans are policy documents, so they don't have the force of law. So they don't change regulations. They are not zoning. They are not the municipal code. They do not create those. They provide recommendations for doing that, but all of that will require separate follow-on action and approval by city council. They don't establish budgets for implementation. Again, they can make recommendations, but the budget is devised by the mayor and approved by city council so that the information in these plans feeds into what's in the budget, but the budget is a separate approval process. And then they don't provide detailed design or engineering. So we can make recommendations like we need a wider sidewalk here, or we need a better crosswalk here, but we're not going to get into the actual design of that or implementation of it. Again, it's a policy, a recommendation, and then there will be follow-on processes to address those recommendations, get into the details, and implement them. So you may think, well, what do plans actually do? You know, if you just said what they don't do, are they really worth doing? Some of you may be familiar, if you're around in the 90s, what the South Platte River looked like in downtown, in the Commons Park area. That's that photo on the left. It really looked like a lot of dirt and a lot of wet area. We did a plan for this area in the early 90s to say how it should grow over the next 20 to 30 years. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with what it looks like now. It has been completely transformed. Look at that photo on the right, and that's even an old photo. There's even more change that's happened since that photo was taken. So we're not expecting that dramatic a change in this area, but this is just to give you an idea that these policy documents, these visions, can really have an impact on how areas grow and change over 10, 20, 30 years. So they really are important and worth doing. So I mentioned there are sort of two scales of planning, citywide planning and neighborhood or area planning. We're going to touch on citywide planning first, and then we'll be able to dive into neighborhood planning, which is what this is. The Near Southeast Area Plan is a neighborhood planning exercise. So citywide planning set broad policies and recommendations that apply citywide. Some of them focus on single topics like our Parks and Recreation Game Plan, which, as the name implies, applies to Parks and Recreation. We have various Denver Moves plans, which apply to different modes of transportation like pedestrians and trails, transit, bicycles. But the two that we're most concerned with are what's known as the Comprehensive Plan 2040 and Blueprint Denver. Comp Plan 2040 provides really high-level guidance on a broad range of topics that touch every area of the city. And then Blueprint Denver is our integrated land use and transportation plan. So it's a little more focused, but again, citywide. Comprehensive Plan 2040, which was adopted 2 years ago in 2019, has 6 what we call vision elements. These are sort of the broad topics that every recommendation falls into. They are equitable, affordable, and inclusive, strong and authentic neighborhoods, connected, safe, and accessible places, economically diverse and vibrant, environmentally resilient, and healthy and active. So these give sort of a high-level understanding of what the broad policies of the city are, right? These are things we want for Denver. And the 2040 is sort of the planning horizon for the plan. So over the next 20 years or 19 years now, these are the things that we want this city to accomplish. Comprehensive Plan 2040 is really so broad that you're welcome to look at it. It's up on the website, but I'm not going to go into much detail on it. What is more applicable to the new Southeast Plan is Blueprint Denver, which, as I said, is the land use and transportation plan. And it has 3 vision elements. It calls for an equitable city, a city of complete neighborhoods and networks, and an evolving city. So I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail. And as I mentioned earlier, equity is really the foundation for our planning efforts. We want to make sure both the planning process is equitable and that the plan itself is equitable. So you need to keep this in mind throughout everything. And because it's so important, I'm going to read this definition of equity that is in Blueprint Denver. I'll try to avoid reading too much to you, but like I said, this is really important, so I want to go over it. Equity is when everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from, has the opportunity to thrive. Where there is equity, a person's identity does not determine their outcome. As a city, we advance equity by serving individuals, families, and communities in a manner that reduces or eliminates persistent institutional biases and barriers based on race, ability, gender identity, and sexual orientation, age, and other factors. So that's the definition of equity we're working with. There are many other definitions of equity you'll see out there, a lot of them pretty similar, but this is the one that is in Blueprint Denver and that we will be using. So to sort of understand equity better and measure it, we have what we call 3 equity concepts. And these are sort of different aspects of equity that we measure how the city is doing now and how it changes and how our proposed policies and interventions could impact these different equity concepts. So the first is called improving access to opportunity. And that's looking at how well people are connected to amenities, education, parks, and health resources, transportation, things like that. The second is reducing vulnerability to displacement. That one, as the name implies, is about residential and business displacement and reducing or preventing the involuntary displacement of both residents and businesses. And then the last one, expanding housing and jobs diversity. So making sure that every part of the city has a variety of housing options and a variety of employment options. Like I said, we measure these across the city. Here you can see the citywide maps showing how well different areas score on these measures. And like I said, we'll get into more detail on this sooner or later, but I just wanted to introduce these concepts so that as you start hearing them, you have an idea of what we're talking about. And then we can really dive into the details as we get into the planning process. So Blueprint Denver includes a whole bunch of recommendations for things that the city should do over the next 20 years. I've pulled out for each of these vision areas a few key policies that Blueprint Denver recommends for the city. And these are policies that our near Southeast area plan will have to help implement or further or refine. So these are things that the plan has to do. This is adopted citywide policy, but we can say exactly how they apply in the near Southeast area. So we wanted to make sure we're integrating services and daily amenities into neighborhoods to address that access to opportunity, provide affordable housing in every neighborhood so that there's a variety of housing options. Along those same lines, provide missing middle housing, which is a term you'll probably hear a lot, which refers to everything between single unit houses and large apartment buildings. We call missing middle. So that's duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, row homes, garden courts, small apartment buildings, things like that. That's what we call missing middle. And so there are certain types of those that need to be integrated into every neighborhood. And then accessory dwelling units, also known as granny flats, or there are a bunch of other terms for it. But small units that homeowners can rent out either above their garage or in their basement or things like that should be allowed throughout the city. And how that's allowed can change, but the idea is every neighborhood should accommodate ADUs. The second part of the vision is a city of complete neighborhoods and networks. We'll sort of break this down into both complete neighborhoods and complete networks, but these go together to create a complete city. So the neighborhood side of it, we look at sort of three broad topics, and these are sort of topics you'll see us divide things into throughout this planning process. Land use and built form, which is, again, what uses are allowed where, what buildings look like, how they function. Mobility, pretty self-explanatory. And then quality of life infrastructure, which is the sort of catch-all term for everything else. So that's parks and recreation, that's stormwater and green infrastructure, that's access to healthy food, access to healthcare, safety, things like that. So sort of everything else falls into that quality of life infrastructure topic. So those are sort of the buckets of categories we deal with, or buckets of topics we deal with. We also have recommendations for the entire city based on what we call place and context. So place divides every area in the city into a place type. And you'll see these listed here: centers, corridors, residential areas, and districts. And there are subtypes within each of those. But that sort of gives an idea of what the appropriate mix of uses is, what the appropriate scale is for buildings, how buildings should relate to the street and to each other and to surrounding areas. And again, we'll get into what those specific places mean later in future meetings. We also have street types that you can see listed here. Similarly, they provide guidance on how streets should function, how they should relate to the buildings along them. And then context provides sort of broad guidance for large areas of the city of how they should develop. And it's a continuum from suburban, that's the S you see on the left, to downtown is the D you see on the right. And so it's sort of denser, more intense, more urban as you go through these contexts. And again, we will provide more details on that in future meetings. But in terms of complete neighborhoods, key policies that we need to keep in mind, we want to improve design in all neighborhoods. So quality design, improve access to shopping, jobs, and entertainment throughout the city, and then also ensure there are parks, recreation, greenery, and social amenities accessible to all. And then complete networks. So there are many different ways people can move around the city, and we want to make sure that each one of those modes has a complete network, and that those networks then work together to create a complete transportation system. So we look at pedestrians, bicycles, transit, and cars as different networks that together form the entire mobility network of the city. In terms of policies for those, Blueprint Denver calls for encouraging shift away from single occupancy vehicles to walking, rolling, biking, transit, and other modes. That's not that we're going to prohibit single occupancy vehicles, people driving alone. And we know different areas of the city have different needs, but as much as possible, we want to make it easy and desirable to use alternative modes of transportation. And then on every street, we want to prioritize pedestrians and pedestrian safety. That no matter what type of street it is, it needs to be able to accommodate pedestrians and keep them safe. And then the third vision is for an evolving city, and that is really looking at our growth strategy over the next 20 years. Where do we want to direct growth? And the idea is that every neighborhood needs to accommodate some growth, but that we want to direct most of that growth to the centers and corridors. So the more dense, more active areas of the city are the areas where we want to see the most growth. And this growth strategy is also really important for our climate impact, that a compact, efficient growth strategy is one of the biggest things we can do to limit our climate impacts and improve our resiliency of the city. So that was a lot of things that Blueprint Denver calls for. As I mentioned, some of that stuff will be further advanced in the near Southeast area plan that we're starting, but some of that is also being tackled at a citywide level. So there are a few projects that we are either currently working on or expect to be launching soon that will address some of these recommendations, including the Expanding Housing Affordability Project, which is looking at improving or providing additional incentives and requirements for affordable housing for all development throughout the city. ADU regulatory updates, so again, that's accessory dwelling units, providing better guidance on how those should be implemented in neighborhoods, and ensuring that when they are added, they are appropriate and function well. Equity in rezoning, so making sure that as areas of the city are rezoned, we are appropriately incorporating the equity considerations I mentioned earlier. And then improving design quality, both in centers and corridors, so mixed use areas, and also in residential areas. So again, the Near Southeast plan can provide refinement or guidance on implementing these, but these we anticipate being adopted at a citywide level. However, there are areas where the Near Southeast area plan can make direct updates to Blueprint, and that's mostly to do with the maps that are in Blueprint. So context, places, growth strategy, street types, and modal networks that I just talked about. Those can all be updated by the Near Southeast area plan. So if we want to change a place type, change a context, change a street type, if that's what comes out of the community, those updates can be made. But they have to sort of work within the framework of Blueprint using those place types, contexts, and so on. So that is a quick introduction to citywide planning. I'm going to hand it over to Libby to talk about area planning and the neighborhood planning initiative. But before I do that, just wanted to stop and see if there were any questions, any clarification needed on all that info dump I just gave you. It looks like there were a few things in the chat here. I think Libby looks like she's responding to those. So if there are no questions at this point, I will hand it over to Libby.
Thanks, Scott. I'm going to go to the next slide. So our neighborhood and small area plans apply to specific areas within the city. So particular neighborhoods or maybe a transit station. And I think as Scott has talked about, they're adopted as a supplement to our comprehensive plan, which is kind of our higher level citywide plan. And they show how topics are related to each other at the local level. Next slide. So these plans update Blueprint Denver, which is our citywide land use and transportation plan. So any recommendations in them must be consistent with the goals in Blueprint Denver, but these neighborhood plans can create more specific strategies that also meet those goals. So they often provide more detailed guidance for things like rezonings, capital projects, and then strategies for future implementation projects. Next slide. So prior to the neighborhood planning initiative, the most recent neighborhood and small area plans only covered about 19% of the city. So recent being in the past 15 years. So that left most of the city without neighborhood plans or really outdated neighborhood plans. And so that's kind of why they developed the neighborhood planning initiative. On the next slide. So this initiative is to ensure that all of the city is covered by a neighborhood plan within just under 15 years. So this map kind of shows how the city is divided up by region. And you can see phase 1, which has already been adopted, included 3 plans. And then we're in phase 2 currently, which will be another 3 plans. So you can see the near southeast there. And then the areas in the light gray are for future phases. Next slide. So this slide shows the topics that will be included in the plan. So the left-hand side that in blue shows the topics that are always going to be included in a neighborhood planning initiative plan. So this includes land use, mobility, quality of life. There will be a section on focus areas like each specific neighborhood, areas that might need special attention. And then there'll be a section on implementation. And then the green section on the right-hand side of this slide shows topics that may be included that are selected by the community. So these could be things like parking or schools, arts and culture, social issues, or food systems, just to name a few. Next slide. So once complete, the near southeast area plan will be used to guide rezonings and other regulations and regulatory work, the allocation of funding, as well as partnerships with external agencies. And so I'll pause here before we discuss the planning process to see if anyone has questions about the neighborhood planning initiative.
Yeah, and Dustin had a question in the chat about how the neighborhoods for phase 1 and 2 were selected. So we had a whole bunch of metrics. I think we used 15 different metrics to assess what we called planning need, which was, as the name implies, looking at how badly each area needed a plan. And we sort of ranked all of the areas based on planning need, and the idea was to do the ones with the greatest need first. And so things that went into planning need were, does the area already have a plan? Is the area seeing a lot of change or expected to see a lot of change in the near future? Types of uses and infrastructure in the area, demographics of the area. So there were a whole bunch of factors that went into that. But that's what we used. We were trying to be as data-driven as possible in making those decisions.
Thanks.
I don't see any other questions. So if not, we can hand it off to Jason to cover the last section.
Great, thank you, Libby. Thanks everyone for sticking with us here. This is going to be the last section of the presentation. So thank you for sticking around, and then we'll break out for what hopefully is a fun activity to kind of conclude the evening. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the planning process, and specifically kind of our approach to community engagement. And this is also kind of a call to action of sorts, where we really want to work with you as the steering committee to help us in our outreach along the way. And so you'll kind of see some of the groups that we would hopefully be targeting to have better representation. And so we're hoping that you guys can help us out to get those folks involved in the planning process. So go ahead, Scott, with the next slide. So starting off here, you've met Scott, Libby, and myself. We are the core of the planning team within Community Planning and Development. You'll also periodically, I think, hear from Cortland Heiser, who works kind of on the larger scale neighborhood planning initiative team. So he'll be around. And we also work with various agencies within the city of Denver. So we work, of course, with Parks and Recreation, Transportation and Infrastructure, our housing group, public health and environment, and of course, the folks at Economic Development and Opportunity. So that's going to be kind of the interdepartmental team. And periodically, you'll see some of those folks attend steering committee meetings, attend some of the larger community meetings that we're going to be holding, and also be available to answer any questions along the way. As Scott mentioned at the very beginning, we do have Steve Chester here this evening. He makes up part of the consultant team that will be kind of acting as kind of this extension of the city staff team. And they're really going to be helping us with some of our technical analysis, as well as some of that community engagement and outreach that we're going to be working very hard to achieve down the road. And then, of course, you've heard from Councilman Cashman and Councilman Black, and we also are going to be working with Councilwoman Sawyer's office, and really having that close coordination and also working with those offices to help with that community engagement as well. So here's a snapshot of our timeline. As we mentioned, each neighborhood plan is about an 18 to 24 month process. And we're really kind of in our first phase here, where we are understanding the area. So working with community groups, residents, and various other stakeholders to really kind of understand some of the existing conditions and conduct kind of our preliminary analysis of the area. As we transition throughout the process, we are going to continue to kind of define some of the issues and concerns that we hear throughout the community and throughout the process, and really start to use those to kind of come up with new opportunities and develop initial recommendations based on some of those concerns and some of those weaknesses that we hear in the area. Halfway through the process, we'll continue to kind of refine those recommendations. So working with you as a group, and making sure that we've hit the mark when it comes to addressing some of the key issues in the area. And then ultimately what will happen is as we start to kind of work through some of those items, we'll be able to draft content and actually put it into a draft neighborhood plan. And so we'll be working with this steering committee on the creation of that plan, the consultant team as well. And then also we'll be giving the community multiple chances to actually review that draft document and to kind of, let us know if we've kind of hit the mark on some of those items. And then this plan, like all neighborhood plans, will go through the adoption phase where we do go through planning board, we go through a city council committee, and then finally the plan will conclude with city council adoption at the end of the process. So here's a snapshot of the near southeast area. So we have 5 statistical neighborhoods, so Washington, Virginia Vale, Virginia Village, Indian Creek, Goldsmith, and part of University Hills North. Makes up about 5 square miles with a population of just under 35,000 individuals and just under 19,000 housing units. And so we have done a little bit of preliminary analysis, demographics research, existing conditions analysis to really understand the area. And it was important to highlight this evening because, again, we want to kind of always keep this in the back of our mind as we start to, involve and ramp up our community outreach. So looking at the demographics of the area, not surprisingly, Virginia Village and Washington, Virginia Vale make up the bulk of the population. They are the largest geographic areas within this area plan. So you can see Virginia Village about 36% of the population, and Washington, Virginia Vale also at 36%. And then Goldsmith, Indian Creek, and University Hills follow that up. And then looking at the renter occupied units and the owner occupied units, about just over half of the individuals in the area do rent their house. And then 43% of those actually own in the area. And this is a snapshot of the race and ethnicity. So you can see here that about 2/3 of the individuals in the area identify as white, 17% Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish, and 10% Black, African American, 4% Asian, and then 4% answered another race or ethnicity. And here we have our bar chart that shows the age in the area. So you can see here that majority of the individuals or some fall between the 20 and 40-year range, and you can see it kind of does tail off towards the elder populations as well. And here is a look at the income of the area. So this is the annual median income, and you can see here it is represented as a bell curve. And then we will switch here and talk a little bit about the engagement strategy. So this is something that I think is very near and dear to our hearts. There is certainly a big push at the city right now to really ramp up our engagement, especially when it comes to these small area plans. And so as a team, we are developing a draft engagement strategy, and this draft will be developed and finalized with input from the steering committee. And so we will have a draft available for you guys shortly. And essentially what this engagement strategy does is it kind of lays out the goals that we have when it comes to engagement in the near southeast area. So it'll help kind of describe some of the methods that we're going to be using to get more people involved, especially from various ethnicities and backgrounds. And then it also is going to identify and kind of track the progress and really making sure that we are hitting the mark when it comes to outreach with some of those hard to reach neighbors, as well as some of the renters and some of those specific demographics in the area, and those folks that we really want to make sure their voices are heard throughout this planning process. So as I mentioned, we are currently developing this engagement strategy with other staff here at the city. And certainly when that draft is available, which will be very shortly, we do want to have input. And again, it's kind of that call to action with the steering committee to really ask for your help in helping us really have better engagement and have better representation throughout this process. So here are some of the goals, as part of kind of our larger engagement strategy within this near southeast area plan. And so, really goal number one is to engage the community members who are representative of the demographics of those that, live, work, and play in the area. We do want to specifically focus on empowering traditionally marginalized or underrepresented communities. So, focusing on those populations that identify as, youth, seniors, people of color, non-native English speakers, people experiencing homelessness, lower income residents, as well as those folks that are renting, and also those folks that do have disabilities. And so really working with those populations, we want to make sure that we can really establish those lines of communication and transparency and build trust between all participants, and kind of create this avenue, if you will, to listen and have platforms where folks can speak their mind, and we can listen to all community members. And so we also want to continue to educate participants on their role in the process and within the project, as well as this importance of having this collaboration among various groups. And so those are really some of the 4 key goals that we're going to be really trying to drive home throughout this process and getting more folks involved in the planning process. So when it comes to equitable engagement, as you know, Scott read the definition straight out of Blueprint Denver, and this is something that we really want to always kind of have on the back burner. We've identified potential strategies as well as some partners for engagement when it comes to encouraging and inviting those underrepresented folks to the table. So you can see here some of those potential strategies that we've identified when it comes to reaching out to immigrant communities, reaching out to the seniors that live in the area, as well as the youth and some of the renters, lower income residents, and some of the diverse populations. And so you can see here we've kind of developed some strategies here, and I think the next slide goes into a little bit more detail, but we really want to, again, work with the steering committee and helping to identify some of those groups that can help us out, with our outreach, and maybe some of those nonprofit or churches within the neighborhood that can really help us, get more people at the table. And looking at some of those special considerations, so we do plan on working with the registered neighborhood organizations in the area, as well as some of the HOAs. We have also identified some citywide groups, whether it's the Denver Chamber of Commerce, the Colorado Black Chamber of Commerce, and other organizations to help us with our outreach. And then I mentioned churches. We have identified that there are actually quite a few local neighborhood churches in the area, and that's a great opportunity, I think, for our team to work with those churches and work with those congregations to get folks more involved in the process. And as was mentioned actually multiple times, we have a very unique geography when it comes to this near southeast area. And so, we border with the city of Glendale, and as well as Arapahoe County on the east. And so we want to always make sure that we are partnering with those adjacent jurisdictions and making sure that, we have equitable outreach both with those neighbors as well, and making sure that, those jurisdictions are also very well aware of what's going on within this neighborhood process. So here are some of the engagement tools that we are going to be rolling out here in the next couple of years. I have already kind of touched on a lot of these. We will have a series of community workshops and meetings, and those will be kind of evenly spaced throughout the process at certain milestones throughout our schedule there. There will be multiple opportunities for surveys, both in person and as well as virtually. We have our steering committee here tonight, and again, it's going to be wonderful to work with this group of folks moving forward. And we also are going to be having certain focus groups and kind of this targeted engagement. We're very excited to even roll out community navigators to really help us kind of, for lack of a better term, navigate, the ins and outs of the community and making sure that we are, again, touching every single community member, every single, point within the community to get folks involved. Scott, myself, Libby, and the rest of the team will be available for, questions and comments along the way in the form of course, email, office hours, and I think we have some ideas for some other unique engagement opportunities to always make sure that folks are comfortable and have access to the planning team, as well as access to the content. And speaking of that, there is a project website that we are going to continue to update throughout this process. And so that's also going to be kind of a one-stop shop for folks to always kind of check in as we move through the certain milestones of this project. So next steps here, we do have a community kickoff that we are working on here. This is going to be kind of a larger event that we're going to be holding with the community, and we're going to advertise as best as we can to get folks to attend. And really the goal of this kickoff is to do kind of what we're doing tonight, to educate the community on the planning process, of course, but more so for us to continue to kind of understand some of the strengths, the weaknesses, and the opportunities and threats that currently exist in the area. So understanding how the community views the area, what they like and dislike, what they would like to see in the future. What is your big idea? What in 20 years, what do you see when you walk down the street, when you drive down the street? And so that's something that we certainly want to make sure that we can capture as we roll out this kind of kickoff for the plan. We are going to continue to identify throughout this process some of the major issues and concerns that come up and really start to focus on some of those areas where we can find improvement. So that will kind of lead us into some of the initial recommendations that we're going to continue to develop. And we're also going to be relying on the community to really help us refine that engagement strategy that I touched on at a very high level, and really try to understand and make sure that there's nothing that we've missed. And there's making sure again that we have equitable outreach, we have equitable participation, and we can get as many folks as possible to continue to help us achieve our goal of a great neighborhood plan. And here are some of the other events that we've thought of along the way. And I would encourage folks that are in this meeting tonight, if there are other avenues and other events that you can think of, certainly I think we are all ears. But I touched on some of the online surveys that we'll be doing where folks can participate in the planning process from the comfort of their home. We will have a virtual meeting. There are also going to be a series of outdoor events. So, pop-up events, kind of some of these intercept activities where, we can hop on with a farmer's market or another kind of small scale event within the community. And a lot of that also kind of leads to some of the target engagement that we're going to be doing throughout the way and continuing to kind of have these smaller group meetings, these kind of focus groups and these stakeholder interviews. And those are just kind of a summary of things that we're going to be kind of rolling out here at the very beginning, but you're going to know that that's something that we'll continue to utilize as we go through the planning process. And so with that, before we roll into our interactive activity, that does conclude our presentation. So thank you again for listening to us here for over an hour. As Scott mentioned, it's not going to be like that every steering committee meeting. So I really appreciate everyone hanging in there with us. But I will pause there and see if any folks have any questions on any of the outreach or engagement that we are going to be doing, not only with the kickoff, but then also throughout the planning process. I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Jason.
Hi there, Jim. Yes, go ahead.
Jason, the community kickoff thing that you just discussed, I have a question about that. Will this be a series of events, one gigantic, incredible event? I ask because about a year ago, I went to some kind of event that was attended by anybody that wanted to go. It was held at the Welshire Country Club, and it was something about SoCo, S-O-C-O, South Colorado Boulevard development between like Evans and Hamden. The mayor was there, people were, presenting and that kind of thing. Do you envision something like that, or is this going to be more of a series of smaller events?
Great question. So in traditional times, and by traditional times, of course, I mean pre-COVID, typically these community events, they tended to be kind of these larger community gatherings where we would kind of find a central location and send out mailers, send out advertisements, utilize social media, work with the council offices to get folks to continue to to participate and to come out and just be a part of the planning process. And so obviously now with COVID, things have changed, and we have kind of this hybrid approach now where we are hoping to have a larger kind of public kickoff, but at the same time, we will have some of these smaller events where folks can participate in a virtual setting, kind of the comfort of their own home. But we will also be kind of having smaller events, kind of intercept events, whether we, maybe set up shop at, Cook Park during the day, or we have a table at the Highline Canal. And so we're still kind of trying to modify and massage that a little bit on kind of what that will look like. Because again, this is all kind of new territory for us, but really the goal is to, get as many people as possible and have our outreach touch as many people as possible to participate.
And then Jason and Scott, there was a question in the chat about what their role as steering committee members will be in outreach.
Great question. So I can answer that one. So as steering committee members, we are looking at this group to continue to tell us if we're hitting the mark or not when it comes to the outreach, and really helping us to identify maybe areas of improvement. But maybe even more important, we are relying on you as a steering committee to help us reach as many people as possible. So you folks live in the neighborhoods, you work and you play in the neighborhoods, and you know how to best kind of navigate the neighborhoods. And so we really are relying on this group of folks to help us with that, and making sure that we're not missing the mark when it comes to outreach with some of those underrepresented organizations and underrepresented individuals. And so I guess kind of a piggyback off of that, we are also going to be using this group to kind of disseminate information. So when we do have a date for that public kickoff, when we do have the draft of the area plan, we'll be using this group to kind of help us send out some of those links, continue to kind of advertise the webpage, and also kind of just let folks know where we're going to be during the neighborhood planning process. Okay.
Looks like Judy has a question. Go ahead, Judy.
Okay. I think I'm unmuted.
Yep, go ahead.
As I said, I live in Indian Creek, and we are made up mostly of multifamily units, except I have 2 areas of single family homes. Typically for us to meet, as I was thinking of having a community meeting summertime, and we have a wonderful park over here, would that be something you might consider?
Absolutely. I think, as Scott mentioned earlier, I think, we are always open to, attending smaller neighborhood gatherings, whether it's a registered neighborhood organization meeting or an HOA meeting, some of those larger events, Judy, that you're speaking to. And so that's another great example of a way that the steering committee can help us identify some of those opportunities within the area where we can, set up shop and have a conversation with those residents.
That might be a good way for us to go. But I'll be checking with my group as well. So thank you.
Thank you, and great idea.
Yeah, and those are that's the kind of feedback we'd love to get. If anyone else has ideas of where we could hold an event or who we should be inviting, please let us know. And you don't have to necessarily do it in this meeting, but you all have my email address. So, if you think of anything tonight or next week or whenever of we should do an event at this park, or we need to talk to this organization, please let us know that information.
Great, Scott. I'm not seeing any more questions or hands raised. Should we move on to our?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I think in the chat room, Guadalupe asked whether survey results and things like that would be made available to the larger community, and Libby responded that they would be posted on the website. I feel that there's a contradiction there, because when you spoke very passionately about outreaching to marginal communities, not everybody accesses the internet and has access to the internet. So what can we do as members of the steering committee to make sure that we are inclusive, as if you have spoken, and to get as much of this information out to the communities?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, that not everybody has access to the internet, and there are other issues, language issues, accessibility issues that we always need to be aware of. And so we will be using a variety of strategies, for sort of convenience sake. The website will be our main thing, where we'll put information, but it will always be available to folks who don't have access to the internet. If they call us, we will provide hard copies of information. We will also try to provide hard copies of things in locations around the area. We'll do
I was thinking maybe libraries.
Yeah, exactly. We'll put it in the Virginia Village Library. We'll
Rec
put
centers.
stuff at Cook Park Rec Center, things like that. That's all stuff we've done in the past. And in the engagement strategy that Jason was talking about, we have specific guidance on what things will be translated and when, what data will be and what information will be made available and when. So as Jason said, we'll share that with you shortly, and you can see sort of the specific guidelines that we'll be following for all that information. I think there was something over here, I think. Oh yeah, so Miranda says, to the extent that it can be done safely, it's important to get back to speaking to each other in person. And that's absolutely right. As Jason was outlining, we're going to try to do as much in person safely as we can this summer. So that's sort of the idea behind these outdoor events in parks and other locations, where we can try to get as many people where they're comfortable meeting with us in person, to talk in person. But we know not everyone's comfortable with that yet. So we're also going to provide these online alternatives. And then throughout the process, we will, as is safe and allowed, incorporate more and more in-person events and activities, because it is always easier to communicate in person and understand in person. But there are some advantages to the online. There are people who find it easier to attend online events than in-person events and things like that. So we also keep doing the online events throughout the process as well, but we'll try to have that balance that everyone can participate however they prefer, so we can get as many people as possible.
And then Maria is asking about translations, like whether the plan will be translated into Spanish or other languages spoken in the neighborhood.
Yeah, so the, as I mentioned, the engagement strategy has our language access plan in it. And so you'll see that it says what documents will be translated. And that's based on the percentage of people in each neighborhood that speak English less than well. So based on that data, we have certain thresholds for what gets translated. And then we always respond to requests as needed. So there are some things that we will translate upfront without anyone having to ask, and those will be available in Spanish or other appropriate languages. And then other things, usually the more detailed things, will only be translated upon request. We typically do not translate the entire plan. These plans are 100 to 200 page documents. And so the translation effort on that is pretty significant. But if that becomes a need, that is something we would consider doing if necessary. But just to be upfront, that's not something we've typically done in the past. And Jenny's question about planning survey givers in public areas like light rail stations and grocery stores. Yes, absolutely. That's you may have seen intercept surveys on the list earlier. That's what we call an intercept survey. So where we go to a grocery store, we go to a light rail station, we go to the Highline Canal Trail, we go to wherever people are moving in and out. We have a sort of a brief survey that people can take to give us information and then try to direct them to other opportunities to participate. Yeah, that's definitely within the menu of tools we'll be using.
Yeah, and Jenny, I thank you for that. I think you've already identified even 2 additional areas that those are locations that we can use to to conduct further outreach. So again, the question was raised, how can the steering committee help? And I think this is a perfect example where when we do get to that point and we are seeking feedback from the community, we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear from you on where we should go and who we should be reaching out to. So thank you for that.
All right. So thanks, everyone. Yes, Jason said great questions, great suggestions. And if you think of anything else, please let us know. But we do want to have enough time for the hopefully fun exercise that we've got here. So with that, Jason, if you want to introduce the Understanding the Area SWOT exercise.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Scott. So this is a great example of how we've had to pivot as a department when it comes to further conducting our analysis and working with a steering committee and really helping us to kind of understand the area. So in a traditional format, we would all be gathered around a table in a room somewhere, and we would have giant maps on the board, and we'd be working with you folks to understand the strengths, the weaknesses, and the opportunities and threats in the area. And so that's our SWOT acronym that you can see here on the screen. And so, but given current times and in this virtual format, we have to do everything online. And fortunately, we found a great kind of interactive program that's going to allow us to do that. And so we want to work with you this evening. So we've got just a little bit over a half hour left. And here in just a moment, Scott is going to break us out into 3 different rooms where myself, Scott, and Libby will facilitate this exercise. And we're going to ask you kind of a series of questions, and the 3 of us will kind of navigate throughout the map, and you'll be able to actually document and identify some of the strengths and the weaknesses, as well as some of the opportunities and threats that you see for not only your particular neighborhood, but also the larger planning area. So we're going to be asking a series of questions, and those questions are here on the screen right now. You don't have to write these down. We're going to have these shown on the screen when we break out into our individual groups here. But when it comes to strengths, we're going to be wanting to understand, some of the characteristics or features that contribute to the quality of life in your neighborhood as well as in the study area. So what is working well? You know, what have you enjoyed over the years and your time within these neighborhoods? On the opposite end of the spectrum, we want to identify some of the weaknesses. So what are the characteristics or features that kind of detract from the quality of life? So what are some concerns that you have? What is not working well in the neighborhood? And we really want you to identify not only kind of larger, you know, trends that you might be seeing in the area, but even some specific geographical locations. So maybe there's an intersection that is just always riddled with accidents, or it's very hard to cross the street. Those are some things that we want to identify in this activity. And then kind of thinking, you know, into the future, there are two things that we also want to make sure that we capture on this map. And so the first is the opportunities. So what are some characteristics or features that could become strengths if they're enhanced? So what do you see as kind of a big idea in the neighborhood, you know, in the next 20 years? So what are some opportunities that, you know, certainly we can achieve through some of those weaknesses? And then finally, some of the threats. So what are some characteristics or features that, you know, could really become weaknesses if they're not addressed in the community? So what are some things that you're a little bit worried about happening, and that if they're not addressed in this planning process, could potentially become weaknesses and larger concerns down the road? So those are the four categories that we're going to be discussing here in the next about half hour. And so with that, we are going to break out into 3 different rooms. And then once we kind of work through these questions as a team, we are going to report back to this larger setting that we're in now, and we're going to have a little bit of a chance to kind of talk about kind of what each group came up with. And so this is a great opportunity to kind of talk with one another. And these are maps that once we're done this evening, I will PDF these, and these are things that we'll be able to also send out to everyone in this steering committee, so we can see the work that one another has done. So with that, Scott, I think we've got about 30 minutes. Do you want to talk a little bit about how we're going to break up into the rooms here? I know Scott's kind of our master controller of the evening, so he knows what he's doing. So I'll let him break us out here.
Well, yeah, I don't know that I know what I'm doing, so we're going to see if this works. So you should all be automatically assigned to a breakout room here, and then, as Jason said, either he, myself, or Libby will join you to facilitate the discussion. Let's aim for the next 20 or 25 minutes for this discussion. And then, as Jason said, that'll give us a few minutes here at the end to sort of report out and recap. So with that, I'm going to give this a shot, and hopefully it works. All right, let's try this. All right, looks like everybody made it. Okay, let me find this. Wait, give me just a second. All right. All right, so as Jason said, we're gonna sort of walk through strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and then I'm gonna mark up this map here as we talk about it. So if there's specific areas that something applies to, let me know, and I will mark it on the map. If it's more general, I'll add it in a sort of a post-it note on the side. So with that, let's start on the strengths, which, as Jason said, is characteristics or features that directly contribute to the quality of life in the neighborhood and should be preserved. What is working well? What has already been accomplished in this planning area? So basically, what do you like? What's good about your neighborhood?
One of the reasons I moved to this neighborhood, and this was actually 25 years ago, was because at least my particular neighborhood, Indian Creek, was accessible to a lot of off-road paths. And so the Cherry Creek bike path, as well as the Highline Canal. And I do see just a lot of enhancements lately in the city, creating bike lanes all the way down Florida from, just to almost Dartmouth and Eisenhower Park, as well as Jewel. So I think one of the strengths of this neighborhood is a fairly decent web of pedestrian activities, with decent crossings and that are being improved. The improvement between Iliff and Quebec of the Cherry Creek bike chase has just been nothing but intriguing to watch. So I hope this continues.
Great. I don't know what's going on here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Great. Yeah, that's perfect. Anything else anyone wants to share?
I think historically the neighborhood was affordable, and it was one of the reasons that we bought here 20 years ago, was because it was close to work and culture, but it was also a neighborhood that you could buy a house and fix it up. So I think affordability at least has historically been one of the strengths of the neighborhood. And I would say like affordability with accessibility. As the phrase goes, drive till you qualify. It's not that there's not affordable homes, it's just they might not be near maybe some of the accessible parts of the city that you want to live near. And I think historically this area has been that.
Great.
I'll semi piggyback off that one. It'll be the downside eventually too, but the accessibility of things here is great. You get the kind of suburban vibe here, but also super close to all the urban activities. You're not too far away from it. Probably the main reason I'm down here, Virginia Village, the statistical area that it is. I specialize in all things mid-century modern, and down here we just have an amazing trove of all mid-century modern buildings. Residential architecture is awesome down here. So I think it's a cool spot that you get. Since most of the homes down here were built in the 50s and 60s. You have just a nice swatch of kind of Americana from that area and the architecture to match it.
Great.
I would say, when we moved in about 10 years ago to our home, we didn't have kids yet. And they said we were the first young people in the neighborhood. And there's been a lot of turnover in the sense that, older generations, we lived next to a lot of original owners. So we've gotten so much history from the community. And now we have seen so many young families come in and kind of reinvigorate what has kind of been fading a little bit. And so I think that's a huge strength, and also the strength of the former generation of the people who built the homes, having them still be such an integral part of our community has been wonderful.
Hi, this is Harvey. I can really only talk about the Winston Downer portion of this. A little bit spread out. I love Lollipop Lake. Everyone, when we get here, and the kids, and the lake itself is just a great meeting place. Although I do see that they took down one of the play areas for some reason, but it's a great place. Also, one of the important things is the way Lowry got developed. We're next to the or bordering to Lowry with all the activities and the excitement and retail that's in Lowry. The established residential neighborhood that we live in, we only have to go across the street to move in, get whether it's ice cream or coffee or whatever it happens to be, with these small meeting places that are available so close to the neighborhood.
Okay, great.
Did I offend someone with that or something? No one's talking.
Yeah, any other strengths, things you like about your neighborhood, things you want to make sure are preserved or maintained in the area as it changes?
This is Chris with Kentro. So we've invested in the area. I live a couple miles from here, but I think for us, why we invested and own so much land here is, one, I think there is a real passion in this neighborhood. We did virtually a small neighborhood plan for one of our sites with Councilman Cashman, and we had a lot of neighborhood meetings, and a lot of people are passionate about this neighborhood, which is kind of endearing, right? It's people actually show up and they care about the outcome. So I think that was one unique thing I saw. And I think location wise, which I think a lot of people hit on, is it's very central. Doesn't feel like you are, because I think in the end, everybody always looks at downtown, but I think you could get to all areas of really regional Denver very easily, since it's so connected either through Leedsdale, I-25, Evans. There's a lot of different ways to get to it, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like you're in an urban core.
I think that it is a good estimate of the strength, and the fact that another reason why I think a lot of people live here is if you have a 2-income family, you can have one person work in the tech center, you're going to have one person work downtown, and they're really pretty much equidistant. And then also the proximity to the airport if you happen to be a road warrior, and so I'm sure some of us were I was when I was working. So it really is a big strength to be in between those two major employment centers.
Great.
Also, one last thing, that from the mom perspective, I have small children, ages almost 9 and 4. The schools have been really on the rise as far as just program implement, new programs. My son goes to an IB school. It's been really wonderful. Lots of, we could not be more thrilled with what's happening in the schools in the area.
Great. All right. Any last second strengths before we move on?
A lot of trees.
Trees, great. Well, I'm writing that down. Show you weaknesses. So characteristics or features that detract from the quality of life in the neighborhood and should be addressed. What is not working well?
I'd like to speak to something that we talked about. One of the key policies that you said was at Blueprint Denver was to try to move away from less single occupancy car use and more to walking. And I don't think this is unique to our area, but the sidewalks in this city are absolutely horrendous and they're dangerous. And it's one thing to go on a hike and always have to look at your feet and where they are, but you shouldn't have to do that all the time in the city. So I would love to see just a major initiative, not only here, but elsewhere in the city, to address the horrible state of the sidewalks in the city.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to ask a question. I don't know everyone in the group, and I don't know who IKF16 is, who just talked.
My name is Lisa Foreman. I'm sorry. I'll try to put my name on my Zoom account. I'm not trying to hide my identity or anything.
I thought you're an alien or something. Sneaking in.
I would like to add generally Evans is my big weakness. I'm just south, about 4 blocks south of Evans, and I feel like it's this kind of eyesore that cuts off 2 really excellent neighborhoods. And I always tell people when they're coming, come on Yale, don't come down to Evans, because it's boy, it's just, it feels like you're walking into a whole nother dimension, and the, you know, the power lines that haven't been carried, and it's just my least
It's
favorite.
it's very interesting that you brought that up as a weakness, because when the exercise was introduced, I wrote that down as an opportunity. East Evans corridor is a huge opportunity. It is, it's exactly what Erica has described it, and it's such an opportunity. So I'm hoping that this group can really focus on East Evans Avenue.
Agree. Weakness and opportunity all in one.
I would think that the entire area that we're looking at has, of course, has traffic problems that we've noticed. I'm not sure how much we can focus in on, but whether you talk about Quebec, how that's set up, or if I go down Quebec, it's great. I get to Evans and get on Evans, it's not so pretty. Monaco is filling up to capacity. Leedsdale corridor is in transition right now, but I'm not sure how much influence we would have on that, since that's a state highway. But the access and I don't know if it's called drivability, but traffic is and noise that goes along with it has been an issue for years. I know there's been studies by the city on that already. I'm not sure if that's in the scope of what this team does, but it certainly does detract from the quality of life.
I'm glad that you brought up Quebec, because I think you mentioned, Harvey, that you live in Lowry.
Winston Downs.
Okay. Oh, so
South.
it's interesting as you drive from, say Lowry neighborhood down Leedsdale through this, on the east side of this corridor. The difference when you cross Leedsdale, between Leedsdale and Evans, Quebec looks like a different boulevard. So, we still have wires. We don't have the nice traffic, I don't know what you call them, lovely things. Just the whole view of Quebec is of that section of Quebec. And of course, I live here. It just looks neglected. And I think that it could also be, and that's what one of my interests was, trying to beautify the area of Quebec, just pretty much from Fairmount Cemetery down to Evans. Then once you cross Evans and you go towards Yale and Bible Park, it's all beautiful again. So with nice traffic signals and pretty more decent, wider sidewalks and so forth and so on.
I would throw in, I know where kind of one of our positive things we talked about was the proximity to things. It'd also be the negative side, kind of hinted at, that we don't have any of those positive things right in our backyard. We're kind of limited on the mom and pop shops around here for restaurants, and we've got Esther's right down the street from our house, but there's not too much more outside of that. So bringing some of those fun neighborhood, downtown driver things to our area, I think would be a really positive thing to bring in. And it goes right into that Evans area. I think that's right for the redevelopment. It's got a whole bunch of retail, commercial space available there. I know Chris's group with Kentra is working on the Arkansas site to bring planned unit development in there, to bring some commercial stuff in, but we just don't have tons of the fun restaurant districts to really hit, besides a couple ones here and there.
Kind of along the same lines of what you just said, Adrienne, I feel like our area lacks character. It lacks something that defines us as a community. You think of kind of the Highlands, you can kind of think of what that entails. You think of downtown, you can kind of think of what that entails. There's just all these different areas of town. You can kind of think of, oh, that has this characteristic. And I feel like our southeast area kind of lacks some sort of defining thing. When people ask me where I live, I'm always kind of trying to describe it, and I usually have to say about I-25 in Yale. And that's about because they're like, oh, Bible Park, where's that? Or so I just feel like there's nothing that really kind of draw that comes to this area that defines it.
Maybe to piggyback on that, Eric, I was going to say, I think you have to take into consideration Glendale as probably all the above, a strength, a weakness, an opportunity, and a threat. Like, having lived within walking distance of Glendale, for the last 20 years, like that's just kind of what it is. And I know that that seems to be out of you all's purview with this plan, but it would probably be one of the most important things to at some point address, like what is the relationship to Glendale with their new development plan, the creek and all of that stuff that they're doing. So, because when people ask me where I live, I say I live within walking distance of the Bull and Bush, because like that's about as good as it gets if you can walk there. So one other really quick weakness, because it's been said, and I don't want to repeat it, but because the plan talks about pedestrian, I think our strength is pedestrian on paths, like the trails. Our weakness is pedestrian on roads. Specifically, if you think, because I live on Holly, they have this new development, up in Hilltop. There is actually not a sidewalk on Holly north of Leedsdale that's walkable. And I'll walk everything, but there's actually not a sidewalk that connects Holly from Leedsdale to Alameda, which is really a crime because you have like new restaurant, Park Burger, ice cream shop up there. But there's no way to get up there unless you're like urban hiking.
You shouldn't have to take a first aid kit when you go out to walk somewhere, should you?
No, you should not. Yeah, and on the Glendale point, we will be trying to coordinate with them. I haven't been able to get a hold of them yet, but we have talked to Arapahoe County already. So I think as Jason mentioned in the presentation, that interjurisdictional coordination is a goal as well. So.
And as a point of clarification, somebody mentioned Leedsdale. Is Leedsdale outside of the scope of this plan because it is a state highway?
It is not entirely, although the things we can do on it are limited somewhat. But I don't know if any of you, probably not, but some of you may have been aware of the Hamden project that went on a couple years ago. So Hamden's obviously a state highway as well. And we worked with CDOT on how we'd like to see improvements made on that. So, and that, as Councilwoman Black pointed out, we don't have a plan down there. So there was a sort of a public engagement process that went on with that. But here we can say what we want Leedsdale to look like in the future. Same with Colorado and other state roads and city roads. And then, whenever CDOT gets around to doing something on Leedsdale, we'll have that community vision for it. And they're usually pretty good about working with us on implementing that. All right, we are quickly running out of time here. So why don't we jump to opportunities? We've already got one down for Evans, but opportunities are characteristics or features that could become strengths in the neighborhood if they're enhanced, anywhere with untapped potential, or if you have any big ideas for changes you want to see in your neighborhood.
Yeah, it would have been nice if the old Kmart could have been a meow wolf.
Yeah, instead of some apartment buildings.
Well, I don't know what the tenor of the apartment buildings are going to be. I haven't seen any neighborhood meetings. I'm not in the neighborhood to be notified. So I'm not, as I mentioned at the beginning, I do have an interest in expanding access to affordable housing. So hopefully some of it will be affordable.
Similarly, I was really hoping for some sort of like city set kind of that would have, because that would be walkable for me. I was like, oh, great restaurants and stuff. No. But similarly, I think just more locally owned, kind of more esters that aren't esters, things that come in that are, that's one of the only places that my family can go that's not a chain really. That we can go and have a nice little family experience. And I would love to have, 15 more of those types of things, different types of restaurants and family oriented things that could come into the neighborhood would be a huge opportunity.
It seems that Evans, because it isn't it's not necessary, it's not really a high price corridor that that Evans could be utilized to enhance a lot more mom and pop type of development. We are going to get a car elevator or car or something, I don't know, coming up at one of the old hotels that they're tearing down. And I have to say, that's not the right vision that I had.
No. What about even just, could an opportunity be some sort of consistency in signage along the Evans corridor?
Or just the elimination of it.
Yeah, maybe the elimination of the large signs or something like that. Yeah. So make it look a little less commercial.
I think one opportunity is taking advantage of the public access to transportation. This is kind of unique that it's got a number of light rail stops, a number of bus lines, and how do you take advantage of that in a good way, rather than really not seeing a lot of people use. We have a bus line that goes up and down Birch, and I would say the frequency of people on that is very little. So what other modes can we start taking advantage of with the other public transportation that's around?
I was going to say I would play to the strength of its access to the Cherry Creek Trail. And I mean, we do have parks in the neighborhood and the maintenance of the park. Somebody mentioned Lollipop Lake earlier. That's where my daughter basically learned how to, well, I won't say swim because that's a little much, but nonetheless, like it's great. So I definitely think, how do you expand that out? And then I'm going to key in on what Adrian said earlier. I actually think if there is any sort of personality, it is kind of this mid-century Americana. You have For My Historic Park, which has kind of the oldest parts of Colorado history, but it does seem to be that this southeast area does have a little bit of kind of that mid-century part of Colorado's history. And, even like the dairy at Leetsdale and Holly, like we have those pictures hanging in our house because like it's a fun story in this neighborhood. It's just a story that's not been told very well, I think.
And don't forget, we also have Fairmont Cemetery, which is a great historic place to wander around.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, and going up, I know Erica mentioned kind of getting a vibe of what the neighborhood is. I'm born and raised in Colorado from the Lakewood side, so I didn't have too much trafficking over to here. But it's the same thing when I tell people where I live. They're like, "Oh, where's Virginia Village?" And it's when they get here, they're like, "Holy crap, this is amazing!" And it goes back to Jared's point of why it was so affordable, but it was so close to everything that was around. But it nobody knew where it was, and that's why it was cheap. It's it was this hidden gem, but you're so close to everything. But I think kind of getting that, again, specializing in mid-century modern, we've categorized a whole bunch of mid-century modern buildings around here. And within Virginia Village, we've found the largest concentration of single-family residential mid-century buildings here. So kind of banking off that and try to, just having that camaraderie. Eric, you mentioned that kind of fun, older residents that have lived here and getting that history from them. We've got Christiana Park and Linwood, which are two of the most coveted mid-century neighborhoods that are here. And, I do everything I can to get the research out of it. And there's a lot of it around here too, that kind of, we've got rich history down here, but it's again, not been found out because we've only been recently being kind of found by the real estate world because no one knew where we were. And now they're like, oh my gosh, you're 5 minutes from everything and things are under 700. Okay, cool. I'll buy 10 of them. So that's why we're seeing kind of the craziness happen here because of that is we were hidden for a long time and now we're not.
When I first moved here, Indian Creek, I worked with a woman who was I was in my 20s and she was in her 60s and she'd been in the real estate business for a long time. But she said that like going out to like Indian Creek was like going out to the country. This is where you went to ride horses and I guess swim in creeks or I don't know. It was so it's I've lived here for a long time and I've seen a lot of things happen on the corridor, but I didn't really even envision that maybe 30 years ago, where I lived was really the boonies.
All right, we are just about out of time. So really quickly, if anyone has any threats they want to mention, so features that could become weaknesses if they're not addressed, or external forces that may harm quality of life in the neighborhood.
I hate to be global, but I'm just going to bring up climate change. I certainly have seen I've just seen a lot of storms that have caused flooding in my general area, and it's just, I think, going to be a concern going forward.
Absolutely.
I'd like to.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
No, go
sorry.
ahead, Erica.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'd like to bring up kind of the issue with the homeless. We're developers, we own several business sites along the area, and we found it very difficult when they kind of come in with these camps and RVs. We don't get a lot of backup from the police. I mean, it can take weeks for us to get them out of there, and it's a huge safety concern for a lot of our tenants. A lot of our property managers have a difficult time because once they vacate, what is left is quite a disaster. I just think that we should point that out, especially because it has gotten so much worse since COVID.
One of the concerns in our neighborhood, we do have small pockets of vacant land or still in the neighborhood, and neighbors are concerned about how that get the infill are. So they're concerned, they want to have controlled infill, not necessarily excluding multi apartments, duplexes and such, but making sure that it gets controlled and blends into the neighborhood in such a way. And another concern is that the neighborhood's aging, and in addition, you talk about infill, and then the neighborhood's aging. So how do you keep the real estate, the stock, housing stock, or homes, housing stock in the neighborhood attractive to for property value purposes, and of course taxes to the city?
Jumping off that one, that the historical perspective of it, always a threat that I worry about. Again, just loving my mid-century world stuff. Finding a way to kind of work well. Again, we all need to figure out how to do density very well, but also still preserving what we have here without just completely scraping it. Highlands is a great example of that. We lost a lot of killer Victorians that were up there to duplexes that are far less able to last 100 years like the Victorians would have. But finding a good way to kind of, keep our history that we have here with working with, the new developments that are going to come in. So that's always the threat of, how do we thread that needle finally of doing the development well without completely trashing our history.
It's really difficult because there's many pockets in this corridor of very, very small kind of bungalow-ish homes. And you can see, we've seen what happened in Highlands, and we've seen what happens in Washington Park. And it's very hard. I think one of the weaknesses is how to keep mega, big suburban 5,000 square foot homes being built on some of these lots, and it's not homogeneous. Some of like I said, some of these homes are very small, and yes, they're going to be improved in some sort of way, but you don't want to eliminate, all the light, as in Marsh Park, when the houses just got so big. And so where there's just no space in between, and the whole street's shady. It's just not good for your well-being. And so I think that's a weakness in finding a way to redevelop some of these areas on the, George Washington, south of George Washington High School, where there's a lot of small bungalows around Garland Park, which is really a lovely, lovely amenity. You see some people doing some improvements to their home, but how can we do that in a homogeneous way of respecting the architecture, as Adrian has said?
I'll just add the middle housing. I know we're tight on time, but I think right now a lot of attention's being going to affordable housing, and then like most of my friends can't buy in my neighborhood anymore, and they're not at the top end, they're not at the bottom end. So this used to be the neighborhood that I think was the middle housing. So I think the biggest threat is that you're going to lose the character of the people who are moving in here, because it used to be an affordable housing neighborhood that was middle housing.
And I'll just say crime.
Go ahead.
Just crime and car theft and that kind of stuff has been on the rise. a lot lately. That would be my only other threat.
Okay, great. All right, with that, let's head back to the group. We're a bit over time here. Let's see if I can. All right, looks like everyone's repopulating here. Sorry if I cut off anyone's conversation there when I called everyone back. We are just over time, and we do want to be respectful of your time. We're asking for 2 hours a month, and we'd like you to commit that to us, and in return, we would like to commit to keeping this to 2 hours. If anyone needs to hop off, go ahead and do that. Really appreciate your time tonight. If folks have a few minutes to stick around, we'd like to do just a really quick report out on what the different groups were talking about, so everyone can get a sense of what was happening in the rooms they weren't in. Again, if you need to leave, no worries. As I said, we'll be in touch in the next few days with some follow-up information. Otherwise, Jason, you want to talk about what your group was discussing?
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. Just making sure I'm off on mute there. Okay, good. So yeah, I'll be quick about this. I think generally speaking, we had a lot of consensus, I think, in our breakout room. When it came to the strengths in the area, our steering committee members really appreciated the existing housing stock and kind of that neighborhood feel. Really enjoyed that as they would walk through the neighborhood, as they would commute through the neighborhood. There was a great appreciation of the trees and the landscaping and kind of the park systems, and there was a general consensus that it's very important to kind of maintain that moving forward. Cherry Creek Trail, not surprisingly, was identified as a strength in our group. And then what I thought was great to hear from our steering committee members is this idea of kind of the diversity that folks would find when they would visit some of the parks in the area. So particularly Bible Park, which is just south of the study area, and then Ash Grove Park. So a lot of strengths in the neighborhood, and a lot of it had to do with just kind of that neighborhood feel that folks get when they walk around. Do you want me to continue to kind of go through, or do you want to pivot?
Yeah,
to
why don't you just go through all of them and then
okay. Great. So some of the weaknesses that were identified were some of the congestion and traffic and kind of lack of pedestrian friendliness along some of the major arterials in the neighborhood. So specifically Leetsdale, Monaco Parkway, Evans, and Colorado Boulevard were called out. This whole idea of, the reason why we're here tonight, that there's kind of lack of planning, there's lack of access to plans, there's lack of knowledge of the planning process. And so this is also kind of looked at as an opportunity that, this is a great opportunity for us as a group to kind of come up with a plan to kind of guide the growth and guide the development in the future of this particular neighborhood. There are general concerns about the sidewalks in the area, both in terms of width and then just kind of the general condition of the sidewalks, and just making sure that folks have, both ADA access and then just general access to, get to goods and services, throughout the neighborhood. Looking at some of the opportunities, we thought that there could be better utilization of some of the commercial space to allow for more diversity of businesses in the neighborhood. A lot of those were identified. I think Evans Avenue was identified as one particular corridor. And another opportunity, speaking in the realms of mobility, was to increase the level of protection for bike lanes in the area. So those bike lanes that currently exist, as well as those that are going to be planned, making sure that those bike lanes are safe for our folks that choose to bike. And then specifically Cherry Creek Trail, even though it was looked at as an asset in the area, it was also identified as an opportunity to have better bike access and along Cherry Creek Trail, as well as to some of the the neighborhood nodes and some of the residential neighborhoods along Cherry Creek Trail. Looking at threats to kind of wrap us up here, we all agreed that affordability was a threat. And Scott, this is something that you touched on during your equity talk. Another threat was this idea that we, continue to it seems like we continue to make streets wider and faster, and that of course is at the expense of pedestrians. And so there's a concern that as we continue to do that, the neighborhoods are going to continue to have congestion, continue to have traffic issues, and continue to be unsafe for pedestrians. So, so at a high level, those are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that my group found.
Great, thanks. Libby, you want to give a quick summary?
Yeah, definitely. So our strengths were obviously the RTD stations, a lot of the businesses along Evans. While Evans isn't the best, there are some good businesses there. The Cherry Creek Trail, Highline Canal. But the weaknesses were very similar as to what Jason said. So a lot of traffic and congestion, especially concerns with new development that's come in. Even things on not sure of whose jurisdiction, like when there's a traffic accident, what police department has jurisdiction, especially because the city, it may take a bit longer than like Arapahoe County, the sheriff's office there. And then for opportunities, one of the things, better access to the light rail station at Colorado and I-25, as well as encouraging developers not to overpark their buildings. So kind of encouraging travel demand management, maybe better opportunities to connect through with bike lanes and things of that nature. And then as far as threats, one of the main things mentioned again was just kind of the having different jurisdictions so close, like with Glendale, maybe if they talk about getting rid of their green space, that will impact this area and these residents, although we don't necessarily have control over what Glendale does. And then, Evans Avenue, while is an opportunity and a weakness, it's kind of everything, and then a threat as well. Let's see, what else did we have on here? Yeah, I think that was the bulk of it.
All right, thank you. And then our group, move this over. So a lot of the same stuff that Jason and Libby mentioned that their groups were talking about. One of the strengths that came up that I don't think either of you mentioned was sort of the location and central location and proximity to amenities, proximity to downtown, the tech center, the airport, that this is a really great location to experience a lot that the city has to offer. But sort of the flip side of that, a weakness, is that it doesn't have a lot of those amenities within the area itself. There aren't a lot of sort of destination restaurants or businesses or entertainment things. So that's sort of a weakness. In terms of opportunities, I think what you all mentioned, the Evans is a big opportunity as it essentially redevelops, creating better sort of streetscape and feel along that and other streets, taking advantage of the access to transit in the area and some of the existing character. There are parts of this that have really great sort of mid-century character in the housing stock, so taking advantage of that as well. And then threats related to that, potentially losing that as these residential areas start to redevelop, new houses come in that don't fit the existing character. I think that was, and impacts from climate change, particularly flooding in the area, and the loss of affordability and the impact that has on the homeless population. So that was really quickly what our group discussed. So that is all we have for tonight. Thank you all for sticking around. Like I said, we will try to keep this as close to 2 hours as possible going forward. So I really appreciate you spending a few extra minutes. Really appreciate you joining the steering committee, your commitment to your neighborhood. We look forward to working with you all over the next 1.5 to 2 years on the plan. We think it's going to be a really great process, and we're glad you're all involved. So we'll be in touch shortly about scheduling the next meeting and some other follow-up issues. And we will see you all in July again. If you have any questions or anything, you've got my contact information. So give me a call or send me an email. And have a good evening. Thanks, everyone.